Have you ever wondered that aren't we all just mostly the same? We watch similar shows, we eat similar foods, and we tend to follow similar fashion trends. It almost seems that we're all programmed to behave a certain way. But why is this so? Let's uncover this mystery and try to understand why is this the case. In order for us to be able to answer this question, we need to understand the role of a society in creating an individual. Section A: How a society creates an individual. Okay, so I want to start this section by asking you a question. How much of you is made by your society and how much of you is made by yourself? Let me know this in the comments. So let's start. So we don't have an exact answer to that question, but we do know that a lot of who we are come from our society. However, we often forget how big of an impact our society has in creating us. This concept is known as social constructivism, and there is no real agreed upon definition for this term. However, we do need to define this term for this video. So I'm going to read it out because it's complicated. So the way how I am defining it is as follows. Social constructivism. It is a process through which a society creates a personality of an individual person. It literally constructs certain aspects of that person's personality and self. This definition is inspired by objective social constructivism as mentioned inside Scott R. Harris' book, What is Social Constructivism? Navigating its use in Sociology. The first thing that every society does is to control our choices. So I won't be focusing on all possible meanings or interpretation of this word, but I will be focusing on how a society limits choices for individuals to shape them in a certain way. So let's take a look at that with an example. Somehow you've managed to create a time machine. Okay, you are a genius. One of the smartest people that ever existed and ever will exist. You're so smart. And you've managed to time travel into the past. And you chose to go to ancient Greece. And you're walking on the streets and you meet one woman and she's in her midlife. And you have a casual conversation with her. In that casual conversation that you have with this woman, let's call her Cora, you learn about her culture, about her everything, and you can also speak any language in the world, no matter what time and age. So you learn about her belief in gods, like she believes in Athena, Zeus, whatever Greek gods there are. And she mentions you that she is fascinated by their concept of afterlife. And she has this concern that if she dies, she might become like a wandering person. It's something in their culture, I'm probably messing it up, but you sit in a boat and you ride in a boat and then you're welcome to the undead world. And I don't know, sometimes you end up not going there and I don't know. So you're supposed to go there or something. So she's worried that she might not go there if she doesn't has a good favor or a good relationship with one of her gods. And that's why she's a very devout person and she really prays to Athena or one of her favorite gods. And you finish the conversation with her and you go back. You also notice her dressing. You see her wearing a cloak and a tunic. I am not so sure what names are of those dresses, but it's a traditional Greek attire of that time. It lacks many of the modern aesthetics that we have. While coming back, you think about her views on life, and they are exactly what you expected. She thinks that women need to be at home, look after the husband or the kids, and it's a very patriarchal society, and the women are limited in their role on what they can and cannot do. Everything you expect. But here are some important observations for you. So let's zoom out of this story and let's see what we can learn from it. The first thing we can see that her choices are severely restricted on what she can and she cannot do. It's not her making those decisions. Those are pre-made by her. Her choice when to be born, her choice where to be born, her sex, her beliefs, and her culture, and her food preferences and like the fashion, all of that is pre-given to her as a template which she follows. But that's only scratching the surface. So the first thing which is heavily influenced is the perception of reality itself. For Cora, maybe performing those rituals take immense importance because in her mind those Greek gods exist. There is a place called Tartarus where she doesn't want to go. So it is important for her to perform those rituals because in her sense of reality those things exist. This same phenomena exists in our current world as well. So let's take two people as an example, person A and person B. Person A, let's say, is from Yemen and is an Arab guy, is a villager. Person B is, let's say, a woman, she's from France and she lives in Paris. So just by this much information, if you just use statistics, you can guess that that Yemeni guy is probably very religious and he's probably a Muslim. And maybe the French woman is maybe an atheist or maybe an agnostic or maybe whatever and not as practicing. Okay, and we can assume these possibilities because it is possible. So for person A, Islam exists. For person A, Allah exists. For person A, doing all of those rituals, all of those things are very, very important. So he will live his entire life obedient to his religion because for him all of those things really do exist. And he needs to make sure that he doesn't go through hell, he goes to heaven, and he will follow all of these rituals. He will do his prayers, he will do his Hajj and all of his other practices. However, for that French person, that woman, God doesn't really exist in her frame of mind. So she will want to have a good balance with her work life, with her relationships, with her friends and all of those things, because in her mind this is her only life and she needs to ensure that she lives the best life in whatever time that she has. So in both of these examples you can see that the perception of reality changes from culture A to culture B. Okay, one very important point over here. On this channel, we are not supposed to take any sides and we are just supposed to see things in a very objective manner and just be welcoming and be nice to each other. This is not really a debating channel in the sense that we are trying to diss one culture or another, and we should be respectful to all and let people make their own choices. But we are trying to understand societies, so we will see them from a distance, from outside, and see what observations or things we can learn by having a distant view. So whatever you have, whatever views you follow, whatever things you do, it's perfectly okay. Okay, and that's not the scope or the discussion of this channel. Now, moving forward. So I explained you how the perception of reality is controlled by the society. Let's move. In case I'm sweating in this video, I'm really sorry. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm trying my best, but next time I will try not to sweat. It's just really hot where I'm recording. Okay, so now let's move on to the next thing that the society tends to control, and that is our perception of morality, what's right and what's wrong. For those of you who have interacted with multiple cultures, meet people from other cultures or other areas, would know this thing that what is right in culture A is wrong in culture B, and what is right in culture B, it is wrong in culture A. And morality becomes one of the most confusing topics that you can ever have a discussion about, because if you see things from outside, if you are within one culture, then according to one culture you know what's right and what's wrong. But if you jump out of every single culture and see things from the top view, you would be very confused on how to define what's right and what's wrong, because it keeps changing with time, with people, with cultures, and with too many other variables. A good example I can think of in this way is how our everyday habits are affected by it. So for example, in South Korea, it's a rude thing to open a door for a person if they're coming behind you. It's not considered a nice thing, and it's something you should not do. It's something which many of the Korean channels recommend, which tell you what do's and don'ts of South Korea. So as you can clearly see by this teeny tiny example, that how a certain thing like opening a door is perceived so differently in another culture. And another good example is, for example, how the family system is different in, let's say, Europe, or let's say in maybe India. So for example, in Europe, the children are supposed to be their own adults, and when they are older they need to leave their home and they need to make a life for themselves. And it's a very normal thing for children to leave their home and make a life for themselves. However, in India, for example, or in other cultures, it might be seen as something rude. Parents might be expecting you to look after them as they age and as they become older, and they might think of you as something who needs to look after them, especially in their old age. And it might be seen as something very rude, which is not rude in the first culture, which is let's say some European culture, but it might be rude in maybe in certain subcultures within India. So as you can clearly see that morality changes across cultures and societies. So that's yet another thing which society tends to control. So a good example is when we look at cross-cultural couples. So you can look at cross-cultural couples on YouTube and you will see this as a clear thing. So there's this one channel I personally follow and really like. I'm not going to try to pronounce the name, it's so hard. It's like YOUUU or something. I don't want to ruin the pronunciation, but there's this Vietnamese girl and she has a German boyfriend, and they make really funny videos and they're very nice. So and often in their videos there's a common theme in which they tend to have friendly clashes on the type of foods they like to eat, and that's really funny. So for the German boyfriend, which is a recurring character in her YouTube series, he tends to not like her food. She also maybe finds the German food maybe not as fun or interesting, and it's like just a bread for her or whatever. So as you can clearly see that even food preferences change from one culture to another. The food on its own is neither good or bad. The food on its own has no value. You have certain eating preferences and likes and dislikes because of what you have been groomed into eating or liking. And this same concept applies to everything. This applies to what we wear, this applies to how we perceive work, this applies to how we perceive how relationships should work, this applies to the do's and don'ts of life, this even applies to in which areas life can exist in. For example, let's say there's a culture that has no concept of hobbies. They really won't have hobbies in that culture, they won't know what that thing is. Okay, so even concepts are limited in certain cultures. Certain concepts might not exist within that culture. So those people who are born into those cultures, they don't understand those things, not because they can't or they don't want to or they decide not to. It's because it's something that they have inherited just by being born, which is not even in their control. Okay, in case I'm sweating in this video, I'm so sorry. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm in a very hot situation, literally. So in all three of the situations I've explained you, the perception of reality, the way how our choices are limited, and that directly controls our preferences. And what was the middle one again? I don't remember, even though it's my video and this is so stupid. So in all of those three domains, you saw how a society heavily influences in creating ourselves. They control our preferences, our day-to-day choices, the way how we perceive different things in our life, our deepest beliefs, and even the way what we consider as right and wrong, the do's and don'ts of life. So is there any individual, or we're just sheeps? Well, we're not sheeps. And there's the other side of this debate as well. So let's look at the other side of this picture. The role of the individual. So in this section, we will be looking at how an individual creates themselves and what things they do. So while it's true that the society heavily influences in creating ourselves, but there are still a lot of things that we ourselves do which helps create us. And let's take a look at those things. We all have certain mental faculties that we use all the time, and that does help shape us into who we are. There are many abilities which an individual possesses. The first one we will be exploring is memory. So it is something absolutely amazing that we all have. We can keep a record of our past and record of events, record of our emotional states, record of the outcomes, and then we can sit and analyze those things. And what this does is that it forms like an accountability system to what we have been fed in by our society. We can match it with our memory and we can know if that claim or that thing we were taught was good for us or bad for us. And then we can decide to change or decide to keep following that thing that we have been told. So I will give you a quick example from my own culture. So over here, there's this thing in which if you visit someone, and if you're young and if the person is they're older, they tend to offer you a lot of food. Okay, and if you're youngsters or if you're really small, they will offer you a lot of food and you don't want to eat so much food because you have already eaten enough, but they keep on feeding you more and more food. It's their way of showing love and appreciation, but it is counterproductive because, well, too much food means more weight gain and you end up eating too much food, which is not that good. So it's a common thing that you visit people and after a while you will be like, I don't want to eat, it's not good for me and I will gain weight or something like that. But they will push back against you and they will tell you that, look, you should eat more food, you're just young, you're not like an old man or old woman or old whatever, and no matter how much food you will eat, it will have no impact on your weight. So this is a cultural belief that if you're young and if you eat a lot of food, you will not gain any weight. This is not a scientific claim or anything, it's a cultural belief. So I can use my memory over here and that actually helps me counter this claim. So if I look back and if I know that in some month I ended up visiting a lot of people and I was served a lot of food, I know that I gained weight because I remember my weight at that time. Okay, and I know when I was visiting less people and eating more I normally do, I had less weight. So my memory and some of reasoning using that, so I use the memory and I combine it with reasoning, and I can clearly see that that claim by the society was wrong. So this is how one way how individuals challenge the narratives inside the society and define themselves their own way. That's the first way how we make ourselves, by using our memory and combining it with reasoning. The other way how we challenge any social narratives and build ourselves is by using analysis or deductions. So in the first example, we just use memory to match if a claim was correct or not. But that same example can be tested by an actual hypothesis. So for example, does eating more food result in more gain? And the answer is yes, not because of a belief or something I know, but because I can practically measure it. I can keep eating more food and I will see an increase in the amount of weight I have. So recently I've been eating less food and I've been trying to be in a calorie deficit, and that has resulted in weight loss. So that's analysis. So we can challenge things based on our personal history, and we can also challenge things based on our analysis. Very important thing that we all have is imagination, and that's yet another thing which allows us to totally challenge anything which the society tells us to do or teaches us. So we can imagine to fly, we can imagine to go underwater, we can imagine to go on the moon. All of these things were imaginations, and we had to have a false belief almost. We had to at least think in that direction, even if that thinking did not lead anywhere, even if many things we thought were wrong. But sometimes we can use our imaginations to push the boundaries of what is possible and what is not possible. So an example for this thing would be going to the moon. At one time, people might have thought it would be completely impossible. But because we believe into it, and when we researched and when we studied, when we learned, we realized that it is actually possible. So those imagination pushed the boundaries of what was possible or not. Previously, the culture or the people thought it was not possible, but those things did become possible. So imaginations tell us, push the boundaries of what's possible or not. Everything that we have these days, like flying planes, submarines that can go in water, the modern system of how cars work, and even apart from technology, the way how we have schools, how we have universities, how we have hospitals, those things have their problems. Those are topics for different videos, but we imagined a different way of living life. And that allowed us slowly over time to push the culture in that direction. And that's how cultures tend to evolve. It's those imaginary people, 1, 2, 3, I don't know how many people at a time in a small culture, which slowly nudge it on what's possible and what's not possible. They innovate. Initially, they are seen as problematic, but later they are seen as innovators. People like Galileo, people like Socrates, they were not liked. I think Socrates was probably killed, and I think Galileo had to apologize to the church. So they were not liked. They had to really push things. But those were academic people. But the same concept applies to people like artists and also even people who just write stories as well. Because stories give us a new way of looking at things. And it helps us to imagine that life can be lived a different way, so we can explore that thing. It starts from our mind, but it can enter in the real life as well. So that's the third way how we can change ourselves and define ourselves. And our imagination is linked with what we wear, our fashion, and that's why fashion tends to be more personalized. And even if it's the same, there would be certain nuances which would help you identify it as a certain person's style, and it helps to differentiate people. The fourth and the last thing that we all have and we do almost all the time is that we make choices. Even if we have limited number of options available, even if our fashion is limited, even if our shows are limited, even if our anything is limited, but even in those limitations, we tend to be unique. We tend to make it more about us. Like if you're buying clothes, like a lot of people wear t-shirts, right? There's nothing unique about it. But I might pick a yellow color more often. I'm not wearing in this video, but it's a personal bias I have. So a person might like the color blue. So we tend to make these small, tiny choices which creates this individuality, even if there's so much homogeneity within one culture. And those small choices add up, and then they add up to create a more unique person who might have started with the very same template that everyone else had in that society. So that is the end of our individuality section. Now all of this brings to our very last section, which is the interplay between the society and the individual, how they both connect together to create an individual. Let's explore that. So there has been an ongoing debate, nurture versus nature, who creates the person, and it has been going on since 3000 BCE, since the time of Plato, I think. Now we understand it's both of these things which create the person. It's neither A, neither B. This is the combination of the two which makes a person. So here's where my personal philosophy comes in. So I personally believe, or I think, or the way how I understand is that a society tends to provide a template, a base template for everyone within that society to follow. The reason why it does that, it helps to simplify life. Imagine you're born and you have to think everything from scratch. It would be so complicated. You would have nothing to get started. What if you start thinking, what's the purpose of existence? Who am I? You will maybe never be able to answer these questions, or your views might change over time. These are very complex questions. So imagine you have a life and you live a whole life and you know nothing. Everything's confusing. You don't even have a list of do's and don'ts. So while those things have their own problem, the advantage is that it gets you kick-started in your life, and you can live a life based on that very simple and easy to follow template. So that's what I think the societies do. So for example, a very basic template that a society gives us is that we need to wear clothes. We need to have hierarchy. We need to go to school, we need to find a job, and we need to get married. Now, there are problems in all of those, in that whole mindset, which I might explore in some other video. Or I perceive there's a problem in that mindset, or there may not be. But it's something which gives you an overview of what to do in your life. If you don't have that overview, you wouldn't really know anything. It would be very confusing actually to live as a person. So as we start to age, we start to use this framework initially, and as we mature, as we change, we start adding a little bit of our personality here and there, our own individuality, not personality, I would use the word individuality here and there into this template. And we might change the foods we are eating a little bit, we might have a bit different fashion choices, we might watch something a bit different which no one else watches, and our views or beliefs might be a bit different than others. And that's how these small rebellions start initially. And as we mature into more and more adults, we have our distinct worldview and our distinct perception of life, reality, and everything in it. There's almost like a push and pull mechanism between the society and the individual. They're almost as if they are in friction, and that friction is good. So when individuals start challenging certain narratives, there's a pushback in all societies. But that's just how societies work. That's how they learn. It takes a very long time to teach a society that a certain thing is not good for them. And it takes even longer time for them to actually fully accept it and then practice it. So it's a very slow process, but it starts by these individuals, these small changes which an everyday person makes. And then they combine together to become into a big social changes, which can be very painful for societies. They tend to have total breakdowns at that time, which is probably not good, and something we need to explore. Why do they have breakdowns when they're trying to change? What's so bad about change? It's a normal thing. Anyway, that's how societies evolve with time and try to become better. They try to change themselves slowly by seeing what tends to work, what the majority in that society or place thinks tends to work for them, and that's how their beliefs slowly change with the passage of time, or maybe one of the ways how it changes with the passage of time. Now I'm getting truly confused, Reza. Yes, I am. So there's a gradual process of change. Individuals don't challenge everything. They start challenging some of the things, something which they think is very problematic in the society. And as more and more people gather around within a similar narrative, then that leads to a big change, which can be painful for a society, but it does lead to societal change in the long term. And the societies do change their base template which they give everyone. But that's a very slow process. Now let's come back to where we started off our video from, and let's answer that question. And I need to take a little bit help in this question. Yes, we are really quite similar, but at the same time there is an individual, and there's a constant struggle inside ourselves to exert ourselves with the outside influence that wants us to be a certain way, and we become the mixture of both of these things. So we are not generic. And also an individual does exist, but we do have a lot of things in common between ourselves, as that helps to run the society more smoothly. Alright, so that's the conclusion, but this leads me to yet another question. It almost seems as if life is like a video game. and it has certain rules or a certain way it's set up, and you can't exactly break those rules, and you need to live your life a certain way to achieve certain outcomes, otherwise you can't achieve them. Like for example, I cannot fly without a plane. If I jump off a building, I will die. Gravity exists. No matter how much I want in my heart to be able to fly, I cannot fly. There are rules. I do need sleep, okay, and without it I cannot function. So there are certain rules, just like how in a game there is a character, and that character has like a health bar and has different attributes, and they even tend to have some personality types like warrior or clerk or whatever. That's the way how life is a bit as well. So when we're born, we're assigned certain things, certain attributes, and it feels like as if life is a video game. So that's something I would be exploring in my next video. So I hope you see that video as well. And now I'm at the conclusion of this video. I really want to thank you for watching. If you really reach at this point, I'm so grateful. This is my first YouTube video. I did make videos earlier, like a very long time ago, and they were like super trashy, but that doesn't count. Okay, that doesn't count. They were really bad, and it means so much to me that you've watched it all the way till here. And I would love if you can show me your support and appreciation. It genuinely means quite a lot to me. So feel free to write your comments, give me your feedback, like the video, rewatch the video, do anything you like with the video, okay? Just engage with the video, subscribe if you want to, it's up to you. And be posted for the next video as well. I'll try to do a better job in my next video, try to make it even more engaging and more story-like. Okay, this is the ending. Okay, see you next time, guys. I don't want to see you guys. Okay, anyway, so see you next time, citizens of the internet. Take care till we meet next time. Bye. How do I finish the video? Probably I should do this.